think we all reach a point where we realize productivity doesn't actually make us all that happy. I think most of us spend our 20s chasing this traditional idea of a career, of success that we think is going to feel fulfilling and satisfying. And there's so many of us, whether it's our Saturn return or just getting burnt out in some corporate job, realize that the external markers of success are not necessarily tied with the internal markers of success, and that feeling good, feeling really satisfied, and also getting things done is going to take a whole lot deeper examination. So I thought it would be fun to talk about how my view on productivity and also by extension success has changed in my 30s and how that changes how I approach getting things done, productivity, and all those things nowadays. If we haven't met, I'm Samantha. I'm an operations consultant for small business owners, and I talk about all things small business, productivity, systems, mindset, and finance here because I think these conversations are part of what's going to lead to a generation of happier, more satisfied, successful business owners and people more generally. If you're just signing me, it would mean an enormous amount if you would like this video and hit subscribe down below. I am a new channel and nothing helps more than those two metrics in helping tell YouTube that you'd like to continue seeing my videos. First way my relationship with productivity changed in my 30s is I accepted what I had been sold as the path to satisfaction and I rewrote the narrative. So step one was first just wrapping my head around like, what is it that I am being taught leads to satisfaction and how does productivity play into this? And let's be clear, I did not start thinking about this from this like intellectual lesson standpoint. I started from a very practical level of I was working my butt off in corporate America and I wasn't feeling as satisfied as I expected to be. I was trying to figure out if I was working too much, not enough, on the right things, if something about my inputs and outputs weren't connected correctly, but all that I knew was I wanted to feel differently about my work than I was feeling, and it was time to tackle that. The first thing that I really started unpacking, and this was through reading books and articles and self-reflection and therapy, was like, what is it that is broken here? What doesn't feel connected? And the ultimate thing that became clear to me far more than anything internally that was going on was that I was sold a bill of goods by society about what leads to satisfaction. And that bill of goods is that productivity leads to satisfaction. Now, this is sneaky because I think a lot of people think that the incorrect bill of goods they're being sold is that success leads to satisfaction. But I think the first step in me sort of changing my relationship with productivity was at least acknowledging and accepting that that was what I had been sold. That if I was productive, even if it didn't lead to some external accolade that somebody else saw, if I did something that mattered to me, if I created something, if I produced something, if I worked hard, that then I would be satisfied. There's all sorts of interesting sort of backstory to why this is the bill of goods that we're all sort of insidiously selling each other. And it actually makes me think about one of the first times that I really felt like the lens had been taken off and I could see things clearly was reading this article. I think it was called The Theology of Productivity. I might not be getting that exactly right, but regardless, I'll link it in the show notes below. And this article talked about how people used to be significantly more religious than they are today. But in today's day and age, this article posits that in place of sort of organized religion, we've all sort of worshiping the religion of productivity. It's super interesting. If you're at all interested, you should go read the article because I don't want to butcher it. But these sorts of articles really pushed me on what is it that I have decided is meaningful and what is it that I've decided I have to do in order to be a good person. Just tied in, I think, with a lot of our hustle culture productivity narrative that you're a good person if you're working hard and you're a bad person if you're not working hard or you're not making use of yourself, you're not maximizing your potential. I can't say that I actually have the answer to what the perspective should be. This is something that I'm constantly working through, so stay tuned for a future video where I figure that out. We'll see. Don't count on that too much. But I do think that one of the big things that fundamentally changed my relationship with productivity was taking at least one step back and seeing that I was sort of being indoctrinated into putting productivity above all else. The second thing that really shifted my relationship with productivity in my 30s was I started looking outside the productivity genre, also could be considered the self-help genre. Let me be clear. I'm a self-help junkie, reformed self-help junkie, especially because I used to run a coaching business. And so there was a lot of self-help books that were relevant to my work and what I wanted to offer to clients. But something really shifted when I started feeling things that I didn't like, whether that was sadness or dissatisfaction or malaise or frustration, anything as it related to productivity, what I did for work, purpose, career. And rather than immediately looking for the next most popular self-help book that could maybe address this for me, or going back to one of my old faithfuls, I actually started looking outside of the self-help genre. Yes, this includes reading fiction, because sometimes reading stories that aren't like practically applicable can yield the biggest insights in thinking about just like humanity and relationships and seeing things with more nuance. But also this was reading articles about people working in palliative care, or like with people in hospice, or philosophy, or reading nonfiction still, but in the format of a memoir or an interview with a successful business person, but success defined the way I wanted to define success. So people who seemed genuinely happy, seemed to have healthy relationships with their families, and still were doing something that was impactful about them around the world. And the biggest takeaways that started happening as soon as I started paying more attention to these outside of self-help narratives is how productivity was often very low on the list of what they were optimizing for. They weren't talking about things like efficiency or how productive they were. They were talking about optimizing for the right things. It's like the difference between like an industrial worker on an assembly line that's paying attention to like how many cogs are passing you on the line, to going up to the CEO level and seeing the system from the farthest place back and asking yourself, am I building the right things? When I finish this process, am I happy with the product that's coming out there? What is happening when I'm here working on the assembly line? And is this actually where I want to be, or do I want to be spending my time elsewhere? These people, whether it was somebody who works in palliative care talking about what people really cared about on their deathbed, or super successful business people who maybe did spend some time seriously hustling to build their business, talking about what was worth it and what wasn't worth it, completely changed my perspective on productivity, because it became very clear to me that the normal rule of the road, that bill we've been sold about productivity is the path to satisfaction, leaves a lot of people unhappy. And when you look at the people who are happy at the end of their life, happy in their relationships, happy with themselves, they are not following the norms in how they think about what they're working on, how they're working on it, when they're working on it, who they're working on it with, literally kind of everything in terms of how they think about work. That was definitely one I had to noodle on for a little bit. The third thing that really encapsulates the way my relationship with productivity changed in my 30s was realizing that it's actually about the trade-offs and not necessarily as much about the inputs and outputs. Because there is one person who is inputting the same amount of hours and outputting a certain amount of money, accomplishments, success, and there's another person who has the same inputs and the same outputs, and those two people might have completely different feelings about their inputs and their outputs. And this is where that idea of a trade-off comes in. This comes up for me a lot in talking with my boyfriend in our relationship about sort of the trade-offs that we are and are not willing to take in terms of being able to be with our families. We both have histories in sort of corporate careers and times where we made trade-offs for our social lives, for the earning potential, time with people that matter to us, and realizing that there are people in our lives for whom certain trade-offs are worth it. For some people, making a trade-off of, say, giving up time with family for more earning might make more sense. And for other people, the same amount of work required for the same amount of money might not be worth the trade-off. And wrapping my head around that concept was a little bit freeing, I gotta say, because it stopped placing sort of a ranked hierarchy of this is the best career, this is the next best career, this is third, or this income is best. Because that's what most of us kind of assume, more money equals better. And while yes, money unlocks quality of life, it's needed for survival, there are certain situations in which more money, if it comes with the wrong trade-offs, may not actually be the correct set of inputs and outputs. So really beginning to wrap my head around the importance of trade-offs in your relationship with productivity and success got me to pay more attention to what trade-off am I making in certain decisions around productivity. This isn't just about being in the right career or working harder for more money or less for less money. This can also come into steps to the process. For example, if I implement AI to write my blog posts for me completely, start to finish, I might get a ton of time back and the ability to automate blog posts, which might increase my SEO. But the trade-off might be the quality of my content, which might affect my relationship with my audience. Is that trade-off worth it to me? So yes, one is more productive, but is that productivity worth the trade-off that's coming with it? These are the sorts of questions that I think we have to get down to at a deeper level for us to really get into the pieces that are going to lead to the most successful and satisfying lives. And the fourth thing that I realized around productivity in my 30s is that even asking these questions requires two things: privilege and courage. It is a privilege to be at the point where you can be asking yourself questions about, how productive do I want to be? What does productivity mean to me? Because there are lots of people who are just focused on making ends meet and trying to succeed in a system that is built to help them fail. And so I recognize that even just having this conversation comes from a place of enormous privilege, that I am of the means and experience where I feel like I can examine and play with trade-offs and consider the larger concepts of bills of goods being sold or productivity. That means that I'm a place where my basic needs are taken care of, and I'm optimizing for something as important as satisfaction, where there are so many people that are not able to do that. So I think this just needs acknowledging in this conversation, because if you are not focused on satisfaction because you don't have the time or energy or ability to, doesn't make you bad or less than. I recognize that this evaluation that I'm doing is a luxury. The other thing that it takes is courage. Because, as I referenced in point number 1, we've been sold this bill of goods about success and productivity. And to question that and to begin to consider a different approach, a way to think about how to spend your time and energy and what you create out of that differently than most people, requires courage, and a lot of people won't understand. This is something that I've definitely reconciled with, is having conversations about how I was thinking about my career and what I was working on. Some people just didn't get it. And it might have led to some pushback, or me needing to be able to deal with the uncomfortable feelings of feeling a little bit misunderstood by somebody who just didn't see the world the same way I do. So I also have learned in my 30s, thinking about these topics, that it's a little brave to go against the norm in anything, but this whole productivity, satisfaction conversation is one of those things. So if you're out there having these questions and feeling like your people aren't necessarily getting it, or you feel sort of like the odd duck for considering these things, I just want you to know that you're not alone, and I'm so glad you're here. So there you have it, the 4 things that changed my relationship with productivity, because I think we all know that productivity alone isn't going to make us happy or satisfied, and that we need to ask a few deeper questions. If you found this video at all interesting or helpful, or it made you think, it really would mean the world if you just take 2 seconds to hit like and subscribe down below. It makes such a difference for us small channels to make sure that our videos are reaching the people who are interested in these topics. And with that, I'll see you in the next one.